Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very, very special episode of Grassroots Cricket, in which I, your host Behram Qazi, and my colleague Abdullah Ansari will be reviewing the Perth Test that, well, didn't really end well for Pakistan. They received a pounding at the hands of Australia, and Abdullah bhai, you'd have to say that was expected.
Yeah, I think especially at Perth, it was very much expected. So the result wasn't much of a surprise. But there were a few surprising performances. So yeah, we can get to that.
We'll come to the performances, but before that, I just want to highlight the scoring rate. Now, for me personally, I don't think it was that big of an issue. If they played out day three in its entirety and maybe played out, let's say, 160 overs, I would have been happy. But a lot of people, criticized the rate at which Pakistan scored their runs, particularly, because they had talked up the Pakistan way and we had seen them score it around four and over in the Sri Lanka series. And also, Shan Masood in the, well, post match interview mentioned that they should have scored quicker, right? So, what's your take on all of that?
I'm not really a fan of the scoring rate discussion
Hmm.
in test matches, especially when, again, the opposition declared an innings and you lost. So clearly, taking 20 wickets is the first problem that you have. Generally, with the scoring rate thing, I think that yeah, you can score faster, but it depends on the quality of batsmanship, how well you can adjust to the conditions and everything. And I think in Australia, the players that are strong off the back foot and have a very strong pace game, they are the ones who you can expect to score fast and to score fluently. That would be Babar, potentially Abdullah, depending on how he adjusts. Shan, you can expect to score quickly. But tries to do that anyway. But everyone cannot do the same, and especially you cannot expect them to score runs and score them at the rate that you want when for guys like Saud it's their first to outside Asia
Hmm.
and playing pace and bounce is not necessarily their forte. Imam playing pace and bounce is not his forte, but he gritted it out and he fought, and I thought that that counted for something rather than if he had just scored those runs quicker. I don't see how, if he had scored the same amount of runs, I don't see how that would have benefited Pakistan if they came at a strike rate of 70 rather than, I don't know, 30 odd or whatever it was. So I think it's a very overblown talking point, and I think it's expected to an extent. Perhaps with Shan at the helm, he clearly has this mindset, but I think you cannot expect every single batsman to play in the same way. This is not England. This is not their limited overs resources and their white ball batting units and everything that we're dealing with. These are Pakistani batsmen with clearly defined strengths and weaknesses that need to be considered.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you because, sometimes the grind is very, very important in Test cricket. And also, if we look at India and how they've had a lot of success in Australia, one of their integral members in that batting order was Chiteshwar Pujara. And Pujara isn't known to score quickly. So I was fine with the scoring rate. I would have just liked Pakistan to compete better. And I think for the first 2 days, I was somewhat happy. But day three and day four, it all came crashing down for the visitors. And another big, well, point of discussion and something that has sparked a massive debate within Pakistan cricket circles is the wicketkeeper conundrum. Now, Sarfraz Ahmed kept wicket, scored 7 runs in 2 innings, and missed a stumping that a lot of people were upset with as being labeled as a missed stumping. They thought it was a tough chance, quote unquote. Now, sure, the bounce is always tricky in Australia, but my opinion was, and this was prior to the test, that Rizwan is arguably one of the better glovesmen in world cricket throughout the whole circuit. Now, that's my opinion, of course. And also, I felt that in these sort of conditions where the ball bounces more, he's a better bat as well. And if someone has to keep for 90 overs throughout the day, I would rather have Rizwan keep wicket than Sarfaraz. No disrespect to Sarfaraz, but this has riled up a lot of people, and certain mafias have come to the fore, and it's gotten really, really ugly. So tell me what you made of this selection call, and do you think that Rizwan should keep wicket at the MCG?
I was not at all surprised with the selection call. I think that the seeds of this were sown when Rizwan was initially dropped in favor of Sarfaraz, and I was not in favor of that either because it does not make sense that you drop an established wicket-keeper batsman who is potentially in his prime. I think first of all, the problem with this discourse is that it's very, it lacks a lot of objectivity from all
Hmm.
sides. Everyone's, it's just fan clubs going at war, and unfortunately, the media is compromised because they are essentially fan clubs as well. So there's
Hmm.
very little objective discourse going on. I think for me, the main problem was that Rizwan is around 31 and Sarfaraz is 36, if I remember correctly. That's a 5 year gap. And I think in Pakistan, because of Misbah and Yunus to an extent, we have perhaps overlooked the reality of age related decline in sport. It's a very normal thing. It happens in every sport, everyone suffers from it. And it's a real thing. And when you bench a 31-year-old who is in the prime of his career after a few lean performances for 36-year-old, then it's not like you're just taking up the 36-year-old for a couple of matches. You're considering him as your first choice option now. And so you've done that, and then obviously it's going to take a lengthy period of struggles for you to justify dropping him unless you're willing to take that brave call. And I think, especially with the whole coaching staff being new, Shan Masood being a new captain, I don't think anybody really wanted to take that call. Even though, just from cricketing logic, it makes sense to go with Rizwan because, like you said, he's a better batsman in these conditions. He's a better wicket keeper. Outside Asia, Rizwan averages, I think, 40 or something, close to that, perhaps more, and Sarfaraz averages 22. And this is a sample size of more than 20 tests. Sarfaraz is one of Pakistan's best batsmen in Asia,
Hmm.
but outside Asia, he's not. Outside Asia, and especially when you're relying on him to bat at six, that's a real problem. So I wasn't surprised by the decision at all. I would not expect it to change for the next test. But I think that the mistake was originally made when this decision was made. Like right now, Babar has had a few lean scores. So another few lean scores, and what will happen? You'll start. Okay, Asad Shafiq is retired now, but in the hypothetical that he was in the squad, then you say let's drop Babar for Asad Shafiq because he's had a few scores and Asad Shafiq is in really good form in domestic cricket. That's not how it works. You don't drop established players so quickly. You have to give them a longer run, and I think that's where Pakistan failed.
I concur 100%. And also, I think you brought up a very good point over there is the fact that, if Sir Faraz is on the wrong side of 30, his reflexes just can't be up to the mark for the international level. And that's not to say that he hasn't been a good wicketkeeper throughout his career. But at this point, you would prefer Rizwan to keep wicket just because, like you mentioned, he's experiencing his peak years. And
Yeah,
also,
with that said, I would still add the disclaimer that Sarfaraz kept really well in the
hmm,
Perth Test. Like there were numerous times when he made some really good stops behind the wickets. It was just that one
hmm,
error. I would classify it as an error because even though it may have been difficult, I think a good keeper would have completed it. But he was generally really good. But that does not mean that he's going to be good over a period of time. Like there's almost no record of 36 plus year old wicket keepers having sustained
hmm.
success in test cricket at that age. I think only Alex Stewart was the one who managed significant success with the bat and with the gloves. So there's a reason why generally most of the great wicket keepers do not play beyond 35 or so.
Yeah, and I think you really pointed out a good fact over there that he generally kept well, but when you bench someone like Rizwan, the slightest of errors gets highlighted, and I do feel for Sarfaraz a bit over there, but then the
Yeah.
seemingly what do I wouldn't call it, the uneasy reality that they've not gone for horses for courses, but they've gone for continuity and sentimentality to a certain extent, I would say. But now who's to say Sarfaraz keeps in the next test, because Rizwan has scored some runs in the practice game, and also there's been a leak, so who knows? I think there is a chance, or there is a situation in which we might see him keep in the next test, but let's see, fingers crossed on that one. You mentioned how taking 20 wickets in a test match is the main challenge, or has been the main challenge for Pakistan in Australia over the last few tours, right? Now, in this test, they were able to take 15 wickets, and 12 of those wickets were taken by the debutant pacers Khurram Shahzad and Aamir Jamal. Now, we'll come to Aamir later, but Khurram, a lot of people liken his action to Dale Steyn. He bowled tight lines, even though he doesn't, bowl at 140 kilometers per hour, but he looked mighty impressive, and he got Steve Smith twice. Smudger was his first ever test victim. So, how impressed were you by him, and how unfortunate is it that he has been ruled out of the tour now? And does that also fall back on Pakistan's management?
Yeah, yeah. I think Ram was really impressive. First of all, he obviously he earned his selection through consistent performances in domestic cricket, and he got there. He has a reasonable workload behind him, and I think perhaps the reaction to his injury has been a bit overblown. I think the biggest concern for Khurram would be that he has, before this tour, I don't think he's ever played in Australia before.
Hmm.
And touring Australia is very, even if you bowl the same amount of overs, bowling them in Australia is very different to bowling them in Pakistan. The grounds in Pakistan are much softer. In
Hmm.
Australia, they're much harder,
Very
and they
true.
have a totally different impact on your body. And like Shaheen has toured there, so he will be familiar with it. Fahim played BBL last year. Aamir Jamal, as we found out, not found out, but it was discussed, I think, during a few interviews during the test match, that he's played club cricket there.
Hmm.
So Khurram does not have that advantage, and that's where ideally A tours and Shaheen's tours should have come in and prepared this batch of bowlers for those conditions, so that their body would be able to hold up better to the rigors that they'll encounter. So I think it's unfortunate, but inshallah, I think he'll be back for the next series, the next test series, even though it's a while away. And I was impressed with his bowling. Yeah, that Stain comparison has been there since he started. I remember I saw him a few years ago, and immediately that came to mind. But people on social media, for some reason, take such comparisons very seriously and think that it means that he's as good as Stain. Or no one's saying that.
Hmm.
It's just something to note. But he bowled really well. I think he was very impressive with the new ball. He got good movement, and he hit the right areas, most importantly. And that's, I suppose, the byproduct of playing regular first class cricket, that you can hit those areas consistently. And I hope he comes back well.
Yeah, I hope he comes back stronger as well. And it's really, really unfortunate, of course, making your test debut in Australia and performing, taking 5 wickets, and then getting ruled out. So I do feel for him. And I saw a video of Junaid Khan, maybe who was talking about his alignment. Now I'm no expert on that. If someone is, they can tell us more info with respect to Khurram and if there are other issues over there. But yeah, I think you make a fantastic point when you say that he had never played in Australia and those playing conditions are harder. Now, Amir Jamal had played in Australia, and I love how this guy is so self aware. He even recounted those times and said that he just wasn't that good back then, and he's worked really hard to be where he is today. And yeah, six for in his first ever test innings, and then took another wicket. So seven for Amir in the game. He's a fighter. He seems like someone who wants to constantly improve and upskill. And I have been really, really impressed. Plus, he's bowled on some really flat decks in the Qaid Azam Trophy. You think that helped him?
Yeah, it definitely did help him. I still remember it was a Friday sometime last year, and on Fridays the first session of in the Qaid Azam Trophy, there's an extended first session. They only play 2 sessions, I think 3 hours each or so. So on that day, he bowled unchanged in the first session for 2.5 hours, 15 overs in one spell. So that shows the type of character that he is. And because I think he finished with 8 wickets in the spell, something like eight
Hmm.
for eight. That was his best. Those were his best first class figures. So he is someone who you can expect to always like put his heart and soul into it and give his best. There were times when he clearly struggled with his rhythm. I think he even mentioned that in his
Mm-hmm.
interviews, that at the start he was struggling for his rhythm. His pace was very up and down. He started bowling 128 or something, and by the end of the day he was bowling closer to 140. So these rhythm issues, and I feel that there's a bit of his action could be a little,
Hmm.
it could be improved a little bit. But overall, I think that he is someone again that you need to invest in for the test pool, because we really need to broaden that pool of players who play test cricket for us, and especially the fast bowling stock. So it's really good to see him come through and shine on his first tour. And yeah, he'll probably have some flat pitches to contend with when we our home season begins next year, and when we especially when England comes. So let's hope he has success there too.
Yeah, we can only hope, and long may his success continue. Of course, we wish him the best for the MCG. Now, there were other pacers in Pakistan's attack. Fahim Ashraf had a pretty mediocre game. People came out with their pitchforks, and I personally feel that when he was doing well in Test cricket, Pakistan didn't back him. He would get you tough runs, he would give you control with the ball. Yes, he had a terrible game, but I also feel like people are being a bit too cruel at this point. And if you play him as a fifth bowling option, he could work. The bigger issue, I feel, is Shaheen Afridi, because anyone who's seen peak Shaheen knows that he has looked out of sorts and hasn't found that same sort of rhythm ever since he came back from injury. So, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I think for him, he tends to become a bit of a punching bag at times. Whenever the team is doing badly, he comes in at eight, and the match is lost, and he gets out, and then everyone starts talking about him. And I think his selection was very strange in the first test. I don't think he makes it as part of a specialist four-man pace
Hmm.
attack. I was expecting him to play at seven as part of a five-man attack, but they went with Salman Ali Agha. But if you go with Salman Ali Agha, then you can choose the better bowler between
Hmm.
Fahim Ashraf, Hassan Ali, Wasim Jr., etc. And I don't know, it seemed perhaps they were a bit on the defensive, thinking about drawing the game, perhaps going with that number eight option who can bat as well. But he clearly struggled, and yeah, I think it's very difficult for him to justify a spot in the team if he's not playing at seven as an all
Hmm.
rounder. I don't think his bowling is currently good enough to be one of the main pacers. And yes, Shaheen is definitely. I think it's very concerning, and the way that he's been bowling over the past few months. Like when he initially returned in the Sri Lanka Test, it seemed that he might be getting a bit better, but I think there were some underlying issues there that are coming to the fore. It's not the same Shaheen of 2020, 2021, where as he would keep bowling, he would get better.
Hmm.
Right now, his body is not responding like that. It's responding in a different way, and that's not proving good for Pakistan cricket, because his pace is down. He's also struggling with his lines. That's why he's not able to attack in the same way.
Hmm.
And yeah, I just don't know when he's going to get the time to work on the issues, because he's now the T20I captain and
Hmm.
PSL and everything. All that is coming up. So let's hope for the best. But it's Pakistan cricket, and it's not. It wouldn't be the first time where we've seen a pacer who started out really well, unfortunately diminish because whatever it is, the board's management of injuries, how players recover from them, and everything. But I think we've seen enough to know that this is a recurring pattern. And
Hmm.
let's hope that there's some way that Shaheen breaks that pattern and comes out stronger after this.
Everyone will be hoping for that. And yeah, it is a bit concerning, right? Especially given Pakistan's history with the way the PCB and their rehab team and their medical team have dealt with pacers of the past. And yeah, I mean, whilst it is a scary thought, I hope that, given that Shaheen is quality, he can come back from this. But your point about workload management and potential burnout is very, very real. If he is captaining the T20 international side, he's playing all of those games. Now, in an ideal world, you'd rest him from those games and you'd want him to play every single test match. But now he's playing
Yeah.
every single game. And who's to say if we'll get to see peak Shaheen, let's say, come T20 World Cup? But of course, fingers crossed on that one. And I just say that if you need to rest him for a test match for him to, work things out, then so be it. And with respect to Fahim, you're right about the fact that you can't just play both him and Salman Ali Agha. You're really depleting your bowling stocks that way, and it's not feasible because you need to get those 20 wickets. So play a frontline spinner and Fahim, or play another frontline pacer and Agha Salman. Those would be the two ways. But just to close things off, very quickly, Abdullah Bhai, tell me what are your potential changes for the MCG test?
Well, obviously Khurram is out,
Hmm.
so I would expect perhaps Hassan Ali. The rumors are that it will be one of Hassan Ali or Mir Hamza coming in. So I think Hassan Ali is a bit more experienced, so
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him make his way back into the team. I haven't seen anything about Fahim Ashraf potentially being replaced, but I really think that if they're playing the same composition with Salman Ali Agha at seven, then I don't think he makes it. But if they're considering playing perhaps Sajid Khan or someone like that, then it makes sense to have Fahim at seven. But otherwise, I think they should just opt for whoever they think is the better bowler out of Wasim Jr. Mir Hamza to play alongside the rest of the bowling attack.
And Rizwan ahead of Sarfaraz for you?
Well, for me, that was always the case, and it
Hmm.
never made sense. But I don't think it'll happen. I don't. I think that it's just realistically, Sarfaraz has had what, four failures.
Hmm.
The first test in Sri Lanka and the first test here. I don't think that they're going to make that call so soon. So let's hope for the best. Let's hope that Sarfaraz gets out of this little rut. He struggled a bit in Australia before also. So let's hope that he finds a way to bounce back.
Yeah, that would be on every Pakistani's Boxing Day wish list, that the national team puts their best foot forward at the MCG. Of course, these sort of Boxing Day tests at the G come few and far between in the life of a Pakistan supporter. So it's a big game. And yeah, I mean, they've got nothing to lose at this point. No one has any expectations. So maybe that can liberate them. But anyway, thank you so much for taking out the time, Abdullah Bhai. It was an absolute pleasure.